Well, hello, ladies and gents. Welcome to the last installment in the chapters 2 through 4 lecture videos. My hope is that at minimum, anyone who's suffering from insomnia has been able to use the sound of my voice from these lecture videos to just be bored to sleep. So, in this last chapter of the lecture series, we look at carbon and why carbon is so important to the creation of life. So, when we talk about something being organic in biology, we're not talking about it being, artisanal or made in fields with non-GMO stuff. We're simply saying it's got carbon in it. So, anything that's carbon or organic in biology, it's a carbon-based molecule. And carbon is significant because it needs 4 valence electrons. It's got 4, it needs 4 more. And because of that, carbon tends to form all sorts of covalent bonds. It's the ultimate sharer of electrons. And one particular partner carbon is really good at bonding with is other carbon atoms. So what it does is create these hydrocarbons. A hydrocarbon is a molecule that's mostly carbon and hydrogen. You have this huge number of hydrocarbons that create all these different shapes. And hey, wait a minute. If structure influences function, what that means is that by being able to create all these different molecules, they can do all these different jobs. And it's the basis of all these different classes of big molecules that creates cells. And that's when life begins. Life can happen because all these big carbon-based molecules can do different kinds of jobs and work cooperatively and create this emergent property of life. Another cool feature of hydrocarbons is that they're just a heck of a lot of bonds in them, right? And what is contained within bonds? Energy. So you can store a tremendous amount of energy in these bonds of hydrocarbons, particularly all the carbon-hydrogen bonds, okay? And because these can do things like form rings, hydrocarbon rings, and because they are covalent, they tend to be fairly stable in water, and so that makes life possible. All right, you really want to make sure you review the Miller-Urey experiment. It's its own individual standard in the AP Bio curriculum. And I think every year I've been involved with the test. Of course, the 2020 administration of the test is sort of crazy. But every other year, there's always been a Miller-Urey question. So the Miller-Urey experiment sought to find out how could you create these molecules that we associate with life. Carbs, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, these big groups of molecules. How could they have been made? Well, what they did was create a closed system that contained gases they thought were present in Earth's early atmosphere, water, methane, things of that nature. And then what they did is they exposed it to electrical sparks. And the sparks were used to simulate heat from hydrothermal vents, volcanic eruptions, lightning strikes, stuff like that. But the idea is if you have molecules that are made of certain atoms and you expose them to energy, well, what's that going to do? It's going to break bonds and allow new bonds to form. So by catalyzing these chemical reactions, by breaking bonds and allowing new bonds to form, what they found is you could artificially, through this process, create some of the molecules we associate with life. You're able to make certain amino acids and like byproducts of protein metabolism like urea. So did they create life? Well, no. But were they able to make some of the molecules that living beings use and require? Yes. So it doesn't answer exactly how life began, but it shows that you can take these substances, rearrange them, and then make these molecules that we do associate with life. Okay? So again, a good experiment to review. Last thing we're looking at here, functional groups. Hydrocarbons can be long chains of carbon and hydrogen. Now they may have different particular shapes, but again, they're going to be made a lot of the same stuff. One thing to pay attention to are these functional groups. Functional groups are these small compounds that can attach themselves to hydrocarbons. And because they are made of slightly different atoms, they can actually change the chemical properties of molecules. So functional groups, I think of them as sort of like flair that can be added to molecules. You can add some functional groups, it changes how it folds up, and then it changes what it's able to do. So you can have functional groups with these oxygens and nitrogens that can make them more soluble in water. You can have these sulfhydryl groups. We'll talk about that more when we get into things like protein structure. But you don't have to memorize the functional groups and exactly what they do and what you find them in. Just recognize that they are there. They sort of change the sort of chemical capabilities of molecules, and we'll discuss specific functional groups as we sort of move through the different chapters of the year. All right, wow. So that was a quick one. What I'd like you to do is sort of think back to the big ideas here, right? Chapter 2 is about chemistry. Think about bonds, covalent, different types, ionic hydrogen. Look at things like concentration gradients of chemical reactions, things of that nature. Chapter 3 gets into water. Water is polar, and because it's polar, it has all these different emergent properties that make life possible. So think through that kind of stuff. Also think about the pH scale, factor of 10 with each step, acids, bases, ion concentrations, dissolving things, all that business. And then chapter 4 is carbon and why carbon is so cool. Carbon forms up to four different covalent bonds, particularly with other carbon atoms. So you can create all these big molecules that do these different things and make life possible. So we're setting the stage for chapter 5, the last chapter in this unit. We'll check back with you later. Thanks a lot, folks. You made it.